So many people have been
You're doing my job too. Glad to have you. Getting prime. Getting prime.
What I did earlier, like 2 weeks ago.
No worries.
What's up, man? Just got that.
Yeah, got somebody over there that got your name and got your long hair, so I'm gonna introduce him to you because he don't know you're coming from there. Come real quick, 2 seconds. Make it 20 seconds. Excuse me.
Sure.
All right. Welcome. Thank you for being here. I'm just here to introduce the store and just run over a couple of things. First and foremost, we are immensely honored to host this event, and we're so happy you could be here in our new home. As many of you know, this is our new location. We were in the old store for decades, and this is a big, big new chapter for Ken Sanders Rare Books. So thank you for being here. Thank you so much. We are really looking forward to the future. As many of you know, we are a bunch of ragtag misfits, and we're going to carry on with our antics as much as we can. We're going to keep telling stories that ignite fires in people's hearts and in people's minds. We're going to keep sharing stories that reveal paths to solutions. It's what we've always done, and we're going to keep that work going. For the past 30 years, we have been committed to preserving and sharing voices, stories, perspectives that have been all too often silenced. And we are just very committed to continuing that work. So thank you. The goal of tonight's event is to gather signatures for Dr. West's campaign to get him on the ballot in the state of Utah for the President of the United States of America. Yes. And also to connect, there are a bunch of wonderful organizers in this room, so we want all of you to connect. And possibly recruit volunteers for his campaign and just create a good connecting event for the community. So thank you for being here. After the event, we'll have a very short book signing with Dr. West. He has an engagement tomorrow morning, so we don't want to keep him for too long. And we'll lead with those who have purchased books already. We have books for sale upstairs and here if you haven't gotten one already. The restrooms are up on the main floor. And if we could have us keep aisles clear to these back zones, that would be immensely helpful for us. And without further ado, I am so very honored and pleased to introduce Palestinian activist and our guest tonight, Aziz Abu Zaid.
Thank you. Thank you, Hattie, for introducing us, and thank you, Mr. Sanders, for hosting this event, and for all of you for attending and organizing and coming with us for a very good cause. So my name is Aziz Abu Zaid. I used to live in Gaza up to 2 years ago when I came to Utah, and this place reminds me of libraries in Gaza that were reduced to rubble by the administrations, in the U.S. administrations, whether Republican or Democrat. And it's one of the things that I really love about campaigning for people who do not identify with one of the two evils that we have to deal with in this country. Coming from Gaza, from a place where every few years you'd have to deal with bombing, you'd have to deal with lots of miseries and killing and death. It makes me feel like there's a lot of work for people who want the justice and the truth that we would need to see in the world. And it's something that I carry with me every day in my life, that think of everyone else, think of the world as a collective, think of how we can make things better for every single one of us. Because it's easier to hate than to love. It's easier to isolate yourself and isolate people than to embrace them and to be part of them and them being part of you. I really like this quote that a person who used to support the Nazi regime in Germany, but then found the truth and found that the bigotry in his own actions and all of the hate that was spread and the dehumanization against the Jewish people in Europe. He said, first they came for the socialists and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came out for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. That was Martin Niemöller, a reverend from Germany, and this is a story that speaks for all of us. And I took this as a pillar of my life. The injustice that's happening to my people in Palestine, in Gaza, the West Bank, and in the occupied territories is just a part of the whole system that is designed to keep us feeling weak, to make us feel powerless, to make us feel like we can't change the status quo. We can't change the system that works only for the rich, the elite, the people who think they own us and they own everything. And this is what drew me the most about Dr. West, because like me, he was always outspoken for the truth. He was always consistent and steadfast This is a word we take very closely back home in Palestine, steadfastness, which is sumud in Arabic. Dr. West was samit, which means steadfast in his positions on justice. He did not get scared or intimidated by all of the, the status quo, the common conception of things. He always, like according to what I read and listened and heard, his interviews and his voice everywhere, he always gave this one image of love, of justice, of unity, and not division. It is easier, it is not easier for people to, embrace others, but it was always the case for Dr. West. And I noticed something really beautiful about him. Whenever he meets someone, he goes to embrace them physically, and I believe that he also embraces people mentally and emotionally as well. And we need some more people like that in this country, not just as, individuals, but also as leaders. And it is my great honor to be here today and introduce Dr. West to you guys. And I hope that, and I believe that even if he wasn't lucky enough, even though he's the luckiest to speak for the truth, but even if he doesn't get elected as president, I believe that he is leading a change that only the pioneers of change like Martin Luther King, like Nelson Mandela, and like all the people who made true change in this world will affect like he will.
Oh, what a blessing to be here. I salute each and every one of you all. We're here in consecrated space because this rare book place is directly connected to what my dear brother Aziz is talking about. Kafka used to say about books, a book ought to be what? An axe that breaks the cold ice inside of us. What's that inside of us? The callousness, the indifference. The great Rabbi Heschel used to say, indifference to evil is more insidious than evil itself. So we in a serious space. But first, let's give it up to my dear brother Sanders. Where's Ken Sanders? Oh, what a brother. What a walking legend. What a force for good. What style, what smile. He's my brother as soon as I set eyes on him. Oh, yes. I'm telling you, my brothers, what it is to be a long-distance runner so that you fall in love with language and literacy. You fall in love with the life of the mind and the world of ideas, but you're always connected to what? The blood, sweat, and tears of precious human beings who are shuddering the way Faust shudders in the realm of the mothers in that classic Faust, who suffer, that's true for each and every one of us, and who then struggles. I want to begin by also saluting my dear, magnificent campaign manager, one among four. Where is she, Kiana? Come on out, Kiana, just everybody continue. There's Sister Kiana. Oh, Kiana did. Oh, yes. And people ask us, oh, Brother West, there's never been a campaign, let alone a presidential campaign that has a quartet. I say, you don't say. You never had a jazz man run to be head of the American empire in order to dismantle the American empire. And make sure that America is a nation among nations and not an empire and asking other nations to defer, whose foreign policy too often is dictated by greedy profit maximizing at the top rather than precious humanity of persons of all colors, gender, sexual orientation, national identities. I'm talking about we human creatures with all of our wretchedness. I'm not naive about the gangster-like and thuggish aspects of our species. Dostoevsky reminds us what? We're the only species who revel in gratuitous violence as we engage in crushing other human beings. Elephants don't do it. Lions don't do it. Tigers don't do it. Theodore, what are you talking about? That's precisely what needs to be confronted for any serious love warrior, freedom fighter, wounded healer, and joy spreader. So I don't want to, so anytime I talk about my campaign, I don't begin with politics, ever. Now my dear brother Michael knows we've been in it together. Is that right, Brother Valentine?
Yeah.
Oh, indeed, indeed, indeed. You got to get yourself together. We are talking about what kind of human being you are. We're talking about what kind of spiritual fortitude you have. It has to do with the four fundamental questions for any serious person who intervenes in public life. The great W. Du Bois raised these four questions in a text. It's not a classic text. Du Bois was the greatest scholar, but he's one of the greatest literary artists around, and he wrote novels, flat as a pancake. But that's all right. We appreciate the effort. But in that novel, Mozart, he says the four questions. What does integrity do in the face of oppression? Integrity. It's not purity, but certainly not venality or cupidity. Venality, selling your soul for mess of pottage. Cupidity, love of money. Integrity. These days, even to talk about integrity makes you look almost like a fool. People ask, oh, you still talk about that stuff? You must be from the 60s. Second question, what does honesty do in the face of deception? In the face of lies that often hide crimes like we're seeing right now in so many parts of the world, including Gaza. The lies that have been told about Palestinian humanity, the lies that have been told about the emergence of the state of Israel and so forth. And being able to do that in such a way that you always preserve the moral and spiritual dimension even of the oppressors themselves, because they have elements inside of them that operate inside of us. The greed, the hatred, the fear, the envy, the resentment, the cowardliness inside of each and every one of us. But when we organize, both internally and collectively, to resist with tremendous resilience, and usually it's the fear that's instilled among those who rule. And what fundamentally breaks the back of fear? Well, I come from a people, a beautiful black people who've been taught to walk around fearful, scared, intimidated. Why? Because if you straighten your back up, you get crushed. Well, we keep fighting anyway. And when you tell the truth, get ready for character assassination or literal assassination. That's Martin, that's Malcolm. We can go on and on and on. But it's not just them. Somebody tells me there's a Big Bill Hayward of the Wobblies and the IWW who grew up in Salt Lake City. Ooh. Isn't that beautiful? That's what you call the connections, the solidarities that we have, the connection between Big Bill Wobbly and Big Bill Hayward and Fannie Lou Hamer. Yes, indeed. And Noam Chomsky and Edward Said, and we can go on and on and on. What is it about them? Integrity in the face of oppression, honesty in the face of deception, and decency in the face of attack and assault. Decency is a revolutionary force, especially in our moment, which is a moment of such spiritual decay and moral decadence. And spiritual decay is simply a moment in which people's internal souls are so chilly, the way the great Franz Kafka reminds us. And your conscience is so coarsened, and your back is so weak, you're spineless. So you get used to just being so well adjusted to injustice and well adapted to indifference, that life is fundamentally about spectacle and image and status and position and who has the most material toys. All about pleasure, but no, very little talk about joy. Very little talk about joy. So much American culture, just a joyless quest for insatiable pleasure. You get any kind of pleasure you want. Stimulation, titillation, lust, and so forth. But what kind of joy do you have? Joy you got to struggle with. Joy you got to make sacrifices with. Joy you got to bear a burden. You got to be willing to cut against the grain. So that integrity, that honesty, and that decency. And then the last one the boys talked about was courage. And part of our problem these days is that courage is too often too rare. And I'm not talking about retail courage. Yeah, I remember those days when I was 18 in college and I was very courageous, but now at 23 I grew up and became very well adapted to the status quo. I'm doing very well, and I remind my kids, you can go out there and have some nice little exciting years. Go march for a little while, or maybe march for George Floyd Jr., or maybe march for our precious Palestinians, or maybe march for the Muslims in China, or maybe march for the Dalits in India, or maybe march for the landless peasants in Brazil. It's a nice little lifestyle choice. And this campaign is nothing but a moment in a movement of a great tradition that produced a brother like me beginning on the chocolate side of town. Young folk come up to me all the time. Oh, Brother West, we just love your black suit. That's your brand. I said, no, I ain't got no motherfucking brand. I ain't got no brand. No, I got a cause. A brand is a market strategy for your upward mobility to make sure your image looks X or Y. The cause is something you live and die for. I love my mama. Take a bullet for her. That's a cause. We were there in Washington this weekend with 400,000 brothers and sisters of all colors, all nations, all genders, but oh, the beautiful focus on those precious Palestinians who are undergoing genocidal attack and been arrested with ethnic cleansing since 1948. And apartheid rules intensified after 1967. That's a cause, deep cause. It has to do with morality. It has to do with spirituality. You would hope that we would have done the same thing for our precious Jewish brothers and sisters in the 1930s, which you talked about Martin. I mean, I'm actually the Dietrich Bonhoeffer professor at Union. You all know who the great Dietrich Bonhoeffer was. The cost of discipleship, ethics, prison, writings. And what did he used to say? He used to begin each session of his underground illegal seminary. And he would tell his fellow German brothers and sisters that if you cannot hear the cries of Jews, don't engage in these Gregorian chants. We don't want no superficial ritual here. He read Amos seriously. If you got to be in deep solidarity if you following that Palestinian Jew named Jesus that I'm willing to die for. That's Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And that's me too. Me and Dietrich got a lot in common. Very much so. You say, Brother West, what's that got to do with the campaign? Everything. Because the tradition that I come out of, the cracked vessel that I am, but shaped by that tradition, spills over now into electoral politics. And that's a difficult thing. It's an alienating thing. We thought you were supposed to talk about policy initially. What do you think about the child tax credit? Well, I'll get to that. But see, I come out of legacy Martin Luther King Jr. I'm an abolitionist. I want to abolish poverty. Woo. See, I don't want liberal versus neoliberal versus. I want to abolish it. I come out of tradition of Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass didn't want a liberal version of slavery. He wanted to abolish the darn thing. What he had to do in the 1840s when he had to make a choice between two slaveholders running for president, he formed a new party called the Liberty Party, which would soon become, I know it's hard to believe, the Republican Party. Here comes that vanilla brother with 1 year of formal college, and this is very important for students. Abe Lincoln. Shakespeare in one pocket, the Bible in the other. Self-educated, passed the legal bars on his own. on his own, which means he didn't go to college, but the college went through him. Integrity, honesty, decency, white supremacist sensibility. This is America, of course. Shot through him, but still leaning in a direction. Brother James, thank you so much for your magnificent work. Give it up, Brother Singleton. Give it up, Brother Singleton. He's working it out. And his beloved. Your name is? Valencia, absolutely, absolutely. So that as an abolitionist, Ida B. Wells didn't want to abolish Jim and Jane Crow, which is American terrorism. Jim and Jane Crow, she wanted what? What she wanted to abolish, she didn't want a liberal version of it. When it comes to poverty, when it comes to asymmetric relations of workers at the workplace, militant wing of the trade union movement, Big Bill Hayward's wing, see, that's my wing. When I go to jail, the trade union movement, I'm not going to jail for those business unions leaders who are trying to make, somehow they just adjust themselves to the greedy bosses at the top. You begin with the decency and the sanctity of your workers, and you push as much as you can, not just for benefits, but for democratic control of the workplace. They say, oh, that makes you a socialist. I'm not into ism. I'm just trying to be decent. I'm just trying to be honest. And I've got a tilt toward the least of these. I take very seriously the gift of my precious Jewish brothers and sisters that are unleashed to the world in Hebrew scripture. This hesed, this steadfast love. Spread it to the orphan and the widow and the fatherless and the motherless and the wretched of the earth and the persecuted and the subjugated and degraded. Yes, powerful. It's not in Plato. It's not in Sophocles. It's not in Aeschylus. It's hard to find it in a variety of different cultures. It's there in the Book of the Dead in Egypt, but there's overlap indeed. But I'm talking about what I had access to as a young brother. Coming up in the West household, Irene and Clifton. Coming up in Shiloh Baptist Church with the Black Panther Party right next door. So on one hand, we get that hesed. And then we following Jesus into the temple, the largest edifice east of Rome. 400 Roman imperial troops hanging out with the ragtag disciples who are afraid and scared to betray him. And he goes in to do what? Run out the money changers. Turn over the tables. Not because he hates the rich. He can't stand greed, and he loves people, especially, first and foremost, the least of these, the poor, the weak, the vulnerable. Yes, that is a tradition that needs to spill over in the American empire at this particular moment. And that's what this campaign is all about. That's what it's all about. So when Martin King talked about the militarism, the poverty, the racism, and the materialism, I take that very, very seriously. Of course, we've got a lot of details in our policies. If you go to, what my dear sister's going to talk about, when you go to the Cornel West 24.com thing. But it's the larger vision that is needed. And that vision is rooted in a vocation, in a calling. It's not a career. It's a calling. And it makes the connection between U.S. imperial foreign policy and predatory capitalist processes at home that tilt domestic policy toward the 1% that my dear brother Bernie Sanders made so much of as he pulled from those precious, courageous brothers and sisters in New York of the Occupy movement of 2011. There's not enough honest truth-telling about that connection. And in order to do that, you have to have a broad enough vision that brings a variety of people together on a host of different issues. Housing, free education, free health care, civic oversight over policing who are too trigger happy, especially when they're in poor and chocolate communities and so forth. Never forgetting about our indigenous brothers and sisters. For me, they don't have to be in the room. for me to forever acknowledge that as an integral part of the history of the country. Why? Only because I'm interested in truth. Woo! Just interested in truth. And the condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak. And if suffering is not speaking, somebody's lying. Just like in your own life. If your suffering is not speaking, you can rest, be assured, you got a deodorized discourse about yourself. It's time to get funky. It's time to get down beneath all of the superficiality and the surfaces and to come to terms with your humanity. And I come from a people of deep, rich, sophisticated gut bucket funk. Oh yes, because it begins with mama's womb. There's love there. That's where all the blood is. That's where all the struggle is. That's where the funk is. I used to travel with Bootsy Collins all around the country. And he would always begin, we're going to take folk not just to the funk, but where the love is. That's the Love Supreme Coltrane, where the funk, where the love. That's Aretha Franklin, Curtis Mayfield. We won't get into all of that tonight. But they go hand in hand with the tradition. Hand in hand with the tradition. And so what I'm asking you all to do tonight, one is the very fact that you would show up is beautiful. We're going to have time for call and response and dialogue. Oh, we got the little precious one. What's the little baby's name? Brother, give it up, Brother Andre. Andre, we love you there, brother. Give it up for Brother Andre. Look at, he's just interested in everybody, everything. Oh, that sense of awe and wonder before the largest processes of socialization grab him. Isn't that true? Is that a little bit too much Rousseau, you think? Lord, Lord, Lord. But I'm here to ask that we've got to get these signatures to get on the ballot. Woo! That's our challenge. We really do. We've got to early March. But that's very, very important because we got to show momentum. And we can talk about it just a little bit more on the ground in terms of call and response. We've got to show momentum. We've got tremendous momentum. I did 8 events on Monday in Birmingham. We started at ground zero in Mississippi with Fannie Lou Hamer's organization, Mississippi Freedom Party, Democratic Freedom Parties. I know we were here with Brother Valentine. When was that, back in November? Was it November you running for mayor?
Yeah.
Give it up for this brother doing his visionary thing running for mayor. We were here in November. Alaskan already put us on the ballot. Woo. Isn't that beautiful? Woo-hoo. Alaska put us on the ballot. I've never been in Alaska in my life. I mean, I have it in my imagination because I spend time in rare book places like this where I can read the text. But I haven't been there physically. So, oh my God. Oregon, we're almost there. Peace and Freedom Party was struggling in California. But we plan to be on at least 20 states by the Ides of March. By March 15th. We plan to be on about 35, 40 by Louis Armstrong's birthday, which is July the 4th. I know it's somebody else's birthday too, but we're going to talk about Brother Louis now. We want to be anti, we can be pro-Louis too. July 4th. But we're going to surprise folk. How come? Because right at the moment when America is reaching another one of its nadirs, its lowest points with all the decay and decline, the choices between a neo-fascist gangster named Brother Donald Trump who's pushing the country toward the second civil war. And they say the only alternative is the milquetoast neoliberal with military adventurism abroad who's pushing the world toward World War III. So the choice is between Civil War II and World War III. Get excited. We wonder why we got chronic depression. Shot across every community. Even the ruling class got problems with depression. Even as they bask in all of their luxuries and so forth. They still what Eliot would call the hollow men and women. empty, shallow, vacuous on the inside. Haven't taken the time, not all of them, I don't want to generalize, but the culture makes it difficult to take the time to cultivate the capacity for love, compassion, empathy, and then to be able to sustain it from womb to tomb. Dostoevsky's definition of hell, remember the masterpiece that he wrote in 1881 in the Brothers Karamazov, is what? Hell is those who suffer from the incapacity to love. Well, those Russians are something sometimes, aren't they? Oh, they're something. I get in trouble all the time because of my love for Chekhov and Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. Oh, you must love Putin too. I said, I'm a Christian, so I've got a certain kind of love. Yes, but no, I'm against gangsters, and he's a gangster too. I'm very honest about that. But what Dostoevsky was getting at was a world in which integrity, honesty, decency, and courage were pushed so far to the side that we couldn't even muster movements to put a stop to the greed of fossil fuel industries that could call into question life on the whole planet, or can't even muster the solidaristic activities required to save certain democratic practices, not just here but around the world. Now that takes us right back to Kafka, Gregor Samsa. Transformation, vermin, uncanny, and yet he has the courage to muster the love of his sister Greta, violinist, player. Franz, what is it about your spirit that's connected to the West campaign, which is nothing but a moment in a larger movement, a wave in a grander ocean? That's why I'm here in Utah. Yes, indeed, because I know there's a cloud of witnesses in Utah who are willing to attempt to enact some integrity, honesty, decency, courage. Their own distinctive traditions that go to their mamas and daddies and aunts and uncles and grandparents that take them back to the best of their ROOTS, their roots, so that they can make spiritual and moral and political ROUTES routes on the way to death. That's where we're headed. What we're going to do before. What kind of human beings we're going to be before the worms get our bodies? What kind of memories will sustain us in our attempt to embrace those who are wrestling with genocidal attacks, inadequate housing, decrepit schools, Salt Lake City, Chicago, Sacramento. That's why I still have a smile. I am never surprised by evil. Read too much Chekhov for that. I'm a blues man. Blues is always on intimate relations with catastrophe. Nobody loves me but my mama, and she might be jiving too. That's the father of the blues, isn't it? That's BB. And that's the B side of the Thriller's gone. We won't get into that. Never be surprised by evil. We're wretched. But we also wonderful. We have a sense of possibility. We have a sense of potential. Those moments in Antigone of Sophocles. Wretched on the one hand, but wondrous on the other. And there's a cloud of witnesses in Utah, like every other place, that can confront the wretchedness unflinchingly, but can also go beyond it and say, we want to be forces for good and will spill over in a variety of different ways. And one way will be to try to intervene in a two-party system in which both parties are so tied to war on Wall Street that it does not provide people with a viable alternative and option when it comes to empowerment of the least of these, the most vulnerable. That's what we're about. So thank you all so very much. I want to bring in Sister Kiana. Bring in Sister Kiana. What a blessing. What a blessing.
I can tell you one thing you never want to have to do, and that's follow Dr. West after he speaks. I can tell you that who he would love to follow him is you, and what he would love to follow him is courage. And so what I'm here to ask is who's courageous enough to help to join our movement of truth, justice, and love, to help us, like Dr. West said, end what has been rampant in this country of the two-party system. Allow us to not have a duopoly, but to have choice that leads to freedom that leads to the liberation of all the things that Dr. West talked about, separation from poverty, separation from pleasure, and entering into joy. We have several volunteers here that have already stepped up and joined the movement. If I can have you raise your hand just so that people can see you all here. I know that some of them might be upstairs still, but we have them everywhere. They've been so diligent in helping us to collect signatures to help us get on the ballot in Utah. And what I'm asking you all today is which one of you all will help join? Which one of you will join? Do I have any hands of anyone who will join? Do I have any volunteers that can, thank you. So everyone who raises their hand will have a volunteer come to you. We're gonna capture your information. If you have any questions about what it looks like to volunteer and petition, please ask those who come to you and take your information. But keep your hands raised for a little, and we have some volunteers out. We'll have everyone addressed. Just keep your hands up for a little while, and we'll have a volunteer come to you, capture your information, and we'll be in touch with you quickly, because that deadline for Utah is coming quickly. And so we need to keep that momentum going. I want to thank every volunteer who has already helped. I want to thank everyone who has already shared. I want to thank all of you for being here. Every little bit counts. Showing up makes a difference, and that's what we're asking you to do. What we have coming up next, though, everybody who wants to join, please keep your hands up for a little while. What we have next is a conversation between Ken Sanders, who is the owner of this great bookstore, who allowed us to come, be in his space, speak with you all, share what it is that we have going on, and allow you to come and join the movement. And Dr. West, he's going to ask a few questions, and then he's going to open that up to the audience for you all to have a couple questions answered. But we will have the volunteers continue to come around and collect your information. So if you see them, we have Dayton, we have Free, we have Mike Valentine, we have, I'm sorry, in the green hat, I forgot your name. Ryan, we have Ryan who will be circulating as well. As they come around, please let them capture your information so that we can follow up with you and gather those signatures. But like I said, Q&A with Mr. Sanders, bookstore owner, and Dr. West, and then we'll have a couple audience questions. Thank you so much. Woo!
Well, Dr. West, I got to say you kind of covered a lot of ground there. So you kind of left me speechless.
Brother, you say whatever's on your heart, mind, and soul in your space that you have given to us as a gift, and we appreciate it and we receive it.
Well,
We got two of them.
I think we're getting back more than we gave.
Ooh, that's a beautiful way of looking at it. That's a beautiful way of looking at it.
Thank you, Brother West. So, I got a couple of years on you.
Barely. Barely, and I'm catching up. But
we grew up in the tumultuous 60s.
Yes.
You have to say tumultuous when you say 60s. A couple of observations, and then I promise I'll get to the question.
No, you take your time. We're in your space.
One, as I remember, now we're going back 50, 60 years here, and memory does play tricks on one, I've learned.
Oh, I'm a living witness for that, my brother.
But one, we thought we were going to save the world. Don't know that we did that, but we also, like that famous Barry Maguire song, I'm telling you, my friend, we're on the eve of destruction. We thought the world was going to end 55, 60 years ago. Well, it didn't. I'm wondering if it should have.
No, I'm glad we still here, though, brother.
Well, okay, yeah, there's a selfish interest at work.
Well, that's not selfish. It's good to be alive.
It beats the alternative.
Well, we don't know about that because we haven't been there yet, but we got to be empirical about this thing. But we certainly know there's some good things going on in space and time, given all of the evil that's
I'll
at
give
work.
you that.
Absolutely.
But I'd never join any religion that would have me.
That's a good sign. That's a beautiful sign. You think Jesus could get into most of these churches, you think? You think Amos would make it into these synagogues these days? You think Buddha could make it into the temples? Oh, Lord, have mercy, brother.
I stand corrected.
No, I'm just trotting out hypotheses.
So, we did think the world was good. There was a lot of bad stuff going on.
Lord,
But now, is it just us? Why? There's more bad stuff. The world is at war. It's not at peace. We're not at peace. We're sucking up us humans. You talked about us humans.
Yeah.
We're the only species that practice aggression, I believe you said, and violence.
Well, gratuitous violence. Animals can
Lions
be
do
violent.
animals do eat each other.
Exactly. But they're not
Even-
going to have a big...
Now, the vegetarian animals don't eat each other, do they?
I haven't checked on that. I'm not sure about that.
So my question is,
Yes,
to all of us out here, and I bet you I'm the oldest person in the room, but there's a lot of young activists here. We love seeing young people. There's a young activist sitting right
Brother Andrew,
there.
Brother
On the
Andrew,
back.
Brother Andrew.
We're turning to the question point. I do meander, I apologize.
Ain't no harm in
What?
meandering, man.
What kind of hope, what kind of dreams can you give the young and the old people out here? What can we do in the here and now to slow down and halt and correct this moral, economic, spiritual crisis that our planet and all the inhabitants are going through, and get rid of this wrong-headed thinking people that all they want is greed and glory from themselves and God on their side but never on yours. What kind of hope? Address us, young and old. Give us some kind of why should we, it's easy to get cynical when you get old, and I'm so impressed by you because you, like my poet farmer friend from Kentucky, Wendell Berry.
Oh, yes, a great
You are
Wendell.
not cynical men. And Wendell's older than both of us.
He is. He's my dear brother, too. We work together. Yes. But one thing is this, though, brother, that cynicism and sentimentalism are two sides of the same coin. You see? And sentimentalism is spurious emotion without mustering the courage for execution. And America from the very beginning began on a sentimentalist tone. We are innocent. How you gonna be innocent? You the authorizer of the devastation of a genocide against indigenous people. Quit lying to yourself. But that powerful sense of born new, born modern, born without a history, born anew, novelty being the central element of one's self-perception and one's national perception is a sign of sentimentalism. And when time and history and your body, because your body decays, so things not too sentimental when you get in our age, right?
Yeah, nothing sentimental
Exactly.
about that.
Now I know on the dance floor when you were 21, you were moving so magnificently, people thought you'd never grow old.
Can I make a confession to you, Brother West?
What's that though, brother?
I still don't know how to dance or swim.
But we were just talking about the
Mother Jones. Mother Jones.
And tell them what Mother Jones said.
Mother Jones, the famous IWW leader, said, "If I can't dance, I won't come to your revolution."
That's right. That's right. And see, my conception of dance would include anything you're doing with your body on the dance floor.
Oh, it has to be on a dance floor?
No, it could be in your house, in your crib, in your bathroom. Something rhythmic that's getting beyond the routine of time. And that's crucial. Why? Because, I'm get back to my point here again, see, that the flip side of that specious emotion that doesn't follow through in execution is cynicism, which is because you can't change everything, changing what you can change is not worth it. We all know the greatest poem ever written about the American Empire. It was written in 1939 in Dow House by an Irish blues man named Eugene O'Neill. It's called The Iceman Cometh, Harry Hope Salome, and the 12. Who we got? The precious ones making their way, precious ones making their way. How you doing, my brother? Good to see you. Let's give it up for these precious ones. Indeed, how you doing, right there? And Eugene O'Neill, what was he saying in that powerful critique of America? He said, America began with a sentimental dream. And when it reached the point where it was clear that the veil was ripped off and that dream was predicated on producing nightmares for others, it hadn't prepared itself to keep struggling. It became cynical. When you become cynical, what does that mean? You become a spectator. You no longer want to intervene. You don't want to be a participant. And what is distinctive about sentimentalism and cynicism? It ain't got nothing to do with love. If you're sentimental about any kind of love relationship, that's infatuation. You all know that. You don't. We need to go through over that. Love is a form of death. Ain't nothing sentimental about death. Something got to die in you in order for you to connect with another person so that some of your narcissism and hedonism can be constrained so you will intertwine with another person and you emerge as a new person in the mess of time and space. That's not cynical. It's not sentimental. Well, what's in the middle of it? Hope, struggle, contestation, growing up. America is unique among empires. There's been 70 empires since the beginning of the species emerging out of the African caves. America is the 68th empire. And every empire comes and goes. Everyone. And often they come and go when? Why? Military outreach, corruption of elites. Citizens feel helpless, hopeless, and become addicted, get caught in weapons of mass distraction, and don't focus on what is required in order to reproduce the best of your society. America is unique among empires to begin with perceived innocence and move to corruption without a mediating stage of maturity. So America has grown powerful, grown wealthy, from 13 colonies to 50. What is that called? Manifest destiny. No, that's a lie. That's imperial expansion like every empire on every continent in the history of the species. But without any maturity, Shakespeare says what? Rightness is all. That's one of the wisest ones that come out of the European tradition, Shakespeare. Rightness is all.
Amen.
Maturation, perseverance, with integrity, with unflinching honesty. That's what Beethoven used to do every day. He'd get up in the morning. He said, how do I look unflinchingly at the evil in the world and still dish out beauty? Listen to my Opus 131 with those 7 movements of the greatest string quartet ever written in classical music. The saddest music in the history of Europe in that first movement. My nephew just tried to commit suicide. I can't hear a note. And it's not Beethoven because he's white, Beethoven because he's German. No, it's Beethoven because as a human being, he decides for rightness, to tell the truth at the deepest level about himself and his society. He's siding with the revolutionaries, right? And he read heroic. He's got Napoleon because he thought Napoleon was going to be revolutionary. Napoleon puts the crown on his head. He scratches it out. The music's going to be powerful, but no longer associated with who I thought was a force for good. And we've seen that before with some of our leaders. I won't mention any names. So many of them, they come in full of fire. You're going to change X. We're going to change Y. And after a year and a half, it's hard to even say the word ceasefire. Mm-hmm. Isn't that sad? Mm-hmm. You can see what's on television and hardly get congressmen, hardly get senators to say it. And ceasefire is the minimum. We end siege, end the occupation, tell the truth. Make sure that there's equality for folk who must learn to live together. What we had in the 60s was in no way utopian or paradise. 1968, George Wallace ran on a third party, got 12.8% of the vote on a thoroughly white supremacist platform. 1968. That's right when we were in the streets. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
You remember that? You remember that backlash?
I do.
Oh, it was powerful. 64, Barry Goldwater had already began to set the groundwork for it. So we never want to be sentimental about any past. Every historical moment has been a moment of overwhelming suffering, structures of domination, species of hatred targeting people. And the only thing that kept it not getting worse was what we have in this room. A cloud of witnesses, the people who say, we're not going to allow it to have the last word. The hatred, the greed, the oppression, the domination. We're going to resist, we're going to fight, and we're going to go down swinging. Brother Duke Ellington said, don't mean a thing.
If you ain't got that swing.
They ain't got that swing. He's talking about a different conception of time where you live in the minor key and you're not right on the note, you under the note, you flatten the note, you on top of the note. That's a blues people's way of living in the world. Duke Ellington said black people have made dissonance a way of life. To live in that blue note, the dissonance, the defiance, the dignity, the very thing that seems to be wrong is what Monk told Train. Train said, Monk, that just sounds wrong to me. He said, Train, sometimes wrong is right. Listen to these blue notes get bluer and bluer and bluer and bluer. It's not going to sound like ragtime. Not supposed to. Tupac come along, hip hop. How come you're talking so fast? Where you get that kinetic orality? That sounds wrong. No, I'm just trying to be true to myself. I can't sing. Can't play instruments because he did away with so many of the instruments in the urban centers. No trumpets, no access to pianos. Got to go to church to find a piano. I'm talking about in the black community. So if you no longer have access to the instruments, what do? You sample the music that's already been produced, and you make your own music which is linguistic, with your language. And some of it's going to be progressive like Public Enemy, and some of it's going to be gangster like making big money for the capitalist processes, commodified for stimulation and titillation, especially as it moves to the vanilla side of town. Oh, they see that market and all of those profit-greedy oligarchs in the recording industry. oh my God, this music is so powerful. We got to dumb it down. We got to make sure it's reduced to pleasure. Ain't no talk about joy and struggle no more. Just make big money. And that's part of the spiritual warfare that's been going on in against the black community. We don't have time for all that right now, but I'm just throwing that out because all of us are connected. What happens on the chocolate side of town, the brown side of town, indigenous people, vanilla side of town. By vanilla, you got all kind of different vanilla. Most of the Mormons were vanilla. They persecuted by other vanilla folk. Isn't that the truth?
We didn't have a choice.
We Protestant and Joseph Smith got some dreams that's complicated.
My political awareness of the 60s started with the assassination of Kennedy, and then we took another one out, and then we took the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King out, and then we took Malcolm X out,
my God.
and we survived that, brother.
Yes, that's true, Brother Sanders. That's true. And then we got all of those deaths of the nameless ones.
Oh, the nameless one.
Yeah, the ones who seem to be anonymous, but they got mamas and daddies just like Martin, just like Malcolm, just like Fannie. You know what I mean? Oh, yeah. And their lives have exactly the same value in the God that I serve as Coltrane, as Sarah Vaughan, because they're human beings made in the likeness with a great sanctity and dignity, just like every life in this room, exactly the same value and significance. It seems very simplistic, has revolutionary implications.
Yes, sir.
It really does. It has revolutionary implications. It's very, very true.
I think, are we still going to do some questions?
I'm here as long as you all want to stay. You want some water though, brother?
Sure. Who's in charge of the questions? Somebody's supposed to be in charge of this. As unlikely as that seems. Should we go to the Q&A? We just kind of been rambling on here.
Well, we having a good time though, brother.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Joy.
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 Don't forget the joy.
Isn't that the truth? Lord, Lord.
We'll do a question here, a question from Free, and one more is the one in the balcony, and this gentleman. Yeah. So.
Oh, thank you. Pleased to meet you.
Good to see you, brother.
My name is Oswaldo. I'm a musician. I play the cello. So, and I'm also from Venezuela. I'm a follower of your work since I lived there, watching your videos on YouTube, between power cuts, of course. And it's an honor to be speaking in front of you tonight for me. Never in my wildest dreams I've ever thought that this would be possible. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I knew your work because you are a philosopher. And if this was about philosophy, there was no need for me to be saying all of this mumbo jumbo, all right? But this is about politics, one of my passions. And my question has everything to do with who I am and with the people that share the same position I have in this country. Unfortunately, when they asked me if I wanted to sign, I said no because I can't vote, because of course I'm not a citizen. And that is my first question. I think that as a hard-working person who pays taxes should have the right to have an opinion of how that money is going to be administered. That's question number one. Question number two would be, being that you get elected and you make it to the White House, what would be your take on immigration, legally and illegally? I kind of lost my train of thought, but what I wanted to say is that, yeah, I remember. Do you think that America has something directly or indirectly to do with the record-beating numbers that we're seeing with people crossing, risking their lives crossing the borders in all sorts of crazy ways, but often not said in order to get a better life and have the chance to give better opportunities for their families, but often are not heard, right? So do you think America has something directly or indirectly to do? Because it appears to me that it's like part of some sort of unresolved conflict with all of those people, countries from whom we're seeing people coming to. And I know those are really two long questions.
No, but those are powerful.
But it's committed to the truth. I think it's something that needs to be brought on into the public conversation. We are getting distracted from the real problems that this nation is seeing, and actually, without trying to offend anyone else, I think that America is the best country in the world to be living. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my brother. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me begin with that first question. You see, you can't talk about globalization. You can't talk about the international capitalist system without acknowledging the degree to which the greatest empire in terms of military might and economic might in the history of the species does not disproportionately influence various parts of that world. And given the Monroe Doctrine, going back to 1823, where it was very clear that the elites in the USA viewed Latin America and Central America as its backyard, that would intervene militarily, would intervene institutionally, intervene economically for what? For the interests of those in Latin America, for the poor and working classes of Latin America? Absolutely not. And people say, oh, Brother West, you just sound so anti-American. No, I'm anti-injustice. When America's on the side of justice, I break dance. They pushed Maximilian out. He was part of the French Empire. I would have been in solidarity with that. French Empire doesn't need to be dictating the destiny of my precious Mexican brothers and sisters. But that was very short. The Mexico that used to be where I grew up, California, Arizona, New Mexico. And USA didn't gain access to it by means of Socratic dialogue. Ulysses S. Grant said in his memoirs that it was the most immoral and illegal war, and he was one of the officers in the war. He was just telling the truth after he left the White House. It's like Jimmy Carter, you know. They leave the White House and leave power, and all of a sudden get fired up and say, now let me really be a force for good. Well, I wish you had started a little earlier. Why did you wait so long? I don't know what Obama's doing. He got what big sister thing. All these mansions, 12 million here, 9 million. Okay, brother, if that's what it's about, fine. I believe everybody got a right to be wrong. But the question is, the least of these includes those who have been subjugated and exploited in other countries who are trying to make their way to the most prosperous empire in the history of the world. And there you've got to make sure first whoever attempts to come in is treated with dignity, is treated humanely. So the first thing that confronts them is not this vicious militarizing orientation. Then you got to massively expand the legal process. And then you do have to be able to enforce some kind of filtering. Yes. Or the whole world would come to America. Not because they think America's the best in the world, but because where they live is such a nightmare. See, when the Irish came here with the vicious British colonialism, with the famine, starvation as a weapon against these precious colonized people, when they got to Boston, they didn't necessarily say, America's the best. They just said, thank God we don't have to worry about these British imperialists anymore. But then when they got here, they were told what? You're white. He said, come again? You're white. Oh. McGillicuddy, could you sing a little Irish ballad just to make sure they know who we really are? And then they pointed to me and James and my dear sister. You in America now. You were Irish, colonized, dominated, hated, degraded. Now you come and you got to stand in front of the Jim Crow train. Where you gonna sit, McGillicuddy? Now some of the Irish communists went to the back. It's a choice, integrity, honesty. I'm going with the black folk. Some of their cousins and some of the Catholic priests said, I think you're taking this Jesus thing too seriously. You in America now, you better come on up in the front and get your goodies. They got big carriage up here. I don't know why you want to hang all this time with these black folk. They getting lynched, they getting crushed. Meaning what? The whole process of becoming an American from wherever you come, Venezuela, Cuba, El Salvador, could be Nigeria, Ethiopia, and so forth. Yes, people want to be in context where they feel as if they have prosperous lives, more safe lives, and have to deal with all of the poverty and the violence and so on and so forth. But back to Eugene O'Neill, you see, Eugene O'Neill says, America is the most tragic of empires because it had so many opportunities that were wasted because of its greed, because of its hatred, racism, and sexism, and so forth. You see, a lot of countries just don't have those large possibilities. That's why people walk around the world and say, well, you know, I'm American. What does that mean when you say I'm American? That means what great F. Scott Fitzgerald has in that next to last paragraph of the great Gatsby. Gatsby believed in what? The green light. What's the green light? Tomorrow things will be better. Tomorrow we'll solve every problem. Tomorrow we'll have no constraints. You hear it in every State of the Union, no matter which president you have. We are Americans. That's all you got to say. We have no limits whatsoever. How come you got all these homeless? We have no limits. When's the last time you've been to the prisons? We have no limits. What assets you have in the housing for the people given the greed of the real estate industry? No limits. Somebody else come up and say, I am Lithuanian. I said, dang, what does that mean? You think Lithuanians running around talking about no limits, we dominate the future, no constraints can ever hold us? No, Lithuanians got a sense of reality. They're going to die like everybody else. They're going to love their children to the best of their ability. They're going to fight if they're able to push back, and if they're not able to push back, they get crushed. See, that's not part of the dominant American narrative. And what happens when an empire begins to disintegrate is when the dominant narrative completely disarms them to deal with their catastrophes and crises. That's what we're living with right now. That's where we are right now. So it's the very best that the right wing can do. And let's be very honest. I mean, the right wing does have some thinkers. There's conservative intellectuals. But you end up with Trump. Why? Impunity. Say and do anything, get away with it. Going all the way back. And I remember the first time I saw Trump was 41 years ago at a Anita Baker concert in the casino that he owned. He walked in with Mike Tyson. Y'all remember Mike Tyson knocking folk in the next week? Y'all remember him? Big muscles and everything. And he was a gangster then, but he was a gangster wannabe. He's still a gangster wannabe. He ain't no Scarface. But now he becomes the grand avatar and exemplar of saving America. That's how low things have gotten. With no accountability, no answerability, all impunity, and think he can get away with it. And he's able to, up until this very moment, even today in court, violating the precious system and lying on it over and over again. He was lying then, but because he was the only vanilla brother in the room at the Anita Baker concert, he had something that is qualitatively different than anything he's ever experienced, which was forced humility. He had to defer to the black folk in there, even though he owned the casino, because everybody knew that when it came to style, he was not on the dean's list. It's true. And then here come Biden, architect of mass incarceration, brags about it. It's a crime against humanity. I've taught in prison for 41 years. When I started teaching in prison, there were 225,000, now there's 2 million. Each life in there is precious. Even when they did something they ought not to do, that one act of those set of deeds doesn't fundamentally define their humanity. They can bounce back like anybody else. And half of them in there was nonviolent offenses anyway. And of course, the deeply racist and white supremacist enforcement of the drug laws at that time, you know, where you go over to the vanilla side of town and folk just flying high in the friendly skies everywhere. Don't worry about no police, nothing. Then on the black side of town, surveillance. Grabbing Jamal, grabbing Letitia, take them straight to jail. You can throw away the key. You look at Biden's speech in November 1994. These super predators, throw away the key. Come on, brother, I thought you were Irish. Come from a hated people, come from an occupied people, come from a colonized people, get to America and act like you've been hanging around with George III all your life. Come on, Biden. Come from a great tradition, you come from a great people. The best of the Irish. I'm not talking about the worst. Because every community has the worst. Black folk, Jewish folk, Irish folk, Italian folk, Russian, everybody's got the worst. But we got the best too. So that when it comes to making sure that the immigrants are not scapegoated, we've got to completely call that narrative into question. And your second question was?
Do I get to choose how my town is being handled?
Oh, right. Well, you keep in mind, though, as important as voting is, it's not the only way of raising your voice. See, I don't believe in fetishizing votes. See, Emma Goldman used to say that if just voting would create revolution in America, voting would be rendered illegal. She's right about that. But the powers that be in the ruling class felt that voting would lead toward a qualitative transformation in the economy, qualitative attitude toward ecology and so forth. They'd make it illegal. That's why they shoot down the leaders of the movement. You have to have strong movements on the outside that creates some space on the inside. So you can raise your voice in movements, you can raise your voice in organizations and structures and so forth and so on. And then we'll be able to also make it possible for one to go in the voting booth as well. See, I come from a people whose anthem is lift every what? Lift every voice, but it's not lift every echo. That's crucial. And we live in a culture of echoes of silos, because the echo's instinctual response. When you lift your voice, you got to find your voice. It's like being a blues woman or a jazz man. Find your voice. You can't find your voice unless you come to terms with who you really are, the wounds and scars and bruises inside of you or in the dark side of your own soul, and transfigure that into what is distinctly you, like your fingerprint. Then you got a voice. See, Charlie Parker said to Miles, when they kicked him out of the band, Miles went home for 1 year and practiced 9 hours every day in St. Louis. People don't know that about Miles. Charlie Parker told the truth to the brother. Find your voice, Miles. Take his little horn on back home. Get himself together. And he showed up another year. Same place, Kansas City. Sounding good. He found his voice. But you can't find your voice unless you bounce it off against the voices of others. Especially like in this rare book space, the voices of the dead. One of the problems of contemporary capitalism is it tries to confine us to just the quick. That's why you look in the academy these days and you read a book, 95% of the footnotes are to books been written within 3 years. You say, now how in the world you gonna write a wise book? And the conversation you have primarily the folk who are still alive. You think the people who are still alive have been the wisest motherfuckers in the history of the species? Please, please. Lord have mercy. You think you wiser than your grandmama just because you went to college? You better check yourself and get off the crack pipe. Hey. Wallace Thurman coming out of Salt Lake City, the only black Nietzschean in the history of American life. Part of the Harlem Renaissance, infants of the spring, the black of the belt. We could go on and on. I don't want to start going into all these precious texts. I get it in. I just get so excited with all these books and ideas and things. But you got to connect it to the dead. Martin's dead. Do we have a Martin Luther King Jr. now? Hell no. Most of these leaders so scared and intimidated and can't wait to sell their soul for a mess of pottage and then show up on Martin Luther King Day in January. Yep. Like a peacock. I can hear Martin saying peacock struck because it can't fly. I come from a people of eagles. I ain't no peacock. Just look at me, look at me. Now, what are you doing to help others grounded in a tradition that has shaped you to give you integrity, honesty, decency, and courage? That's why the voices of the dead are so very important. Not just our personal ones, but intellectually across culture, across nation. I know we got another question. But you had two of them. You
Brother
started
Free?
Oh, yeah, Brother James, Brother James.
Hello, sir, again. I'm there, yes. Appreciate the brother from Venezuela statement and question. Yes, that was very cool. And I agree with you. We are in the greatest nation. I would say the best because they have a treasure here. You know, they have the pirates brought treasure here. And that treasure is what kind of like made this nation. You know, and I know we all know what the treasures are here. And if you don't, Dr. Cornel West will explain to you by, explain to the party here about solidarity, sir.
Oh, what we mean by solidarity. Yeah, let's begin with negative definitions. What solidarity is not. Solidarity is not unanimity. Solidarity is not narrow unity. Solidarity is not sameness. Solidarity is not similarity. Solidarity is those human beings who choose, based on integrity, honesty, decency, and courage, to put their bodies on the line in word and deed to fight for good in the name of something bigger than one's own ego. That's solidarity. It's deeper even in coalition. Because coalition often is defined as the calculation of one's interests, individually or collectively, or one's group. And if it's in one's interest to be in coalition with somebody else, then you come together. When it's no longer in one's interest, then you pull back. Now, solidarity always embraces interest, but solidarity also embraces principles. Integrity is not an interest. It has to do with a moral dimension of who we are as human beings. And that's crucial. And you can see that these days in a lot of the discourse. A lot of people come up to me, Brother West, what do you say to our white allies? I said, show me a white ally. Oh, Brother Ken Sanders is your white ally. Wait a minute now. Bill Evans played the piano in Miles's quintet. He was a white brother. You think Miles thought that Bill was his ally? He's in the motherfucking band. He's in the band. Coltrane, could you play your solo? Cannonball, play yours. Bill, play yours. We got the White Ally solo now. Hey. I grew up with Sly Stone's people. He's from Vallejo. I'm from Sacramento. He's playing my church every fifth Sunday. We knew him as Sylvester. He's a genius. His autobiography just came out. Thank you for letting me be myself. I know you're going to have a good life. Now, he got a white brother on the drums, right? He got Greg on the bottom drums. He got another white brother, Jerry, playing the saxophone. He got the woman, Cynthia, playing the trumpet. So you think when he turned to the two white brothers, it's so nice to have these white allies and Sly and the Family Stone. They're in the mother hugging band. But when you're in struggle and you're in solidarity and you've had to lean on your brother over and over and over, we're in the foxhole together. We ain't looking at each other like allies. We brothers. Whether he can dance or not. We brothers. Or play the piano. I can't play the piano myself. But the important thing is, you got to make that human connection. That's like marrying a sister outside of your culture and say, it's just so nice to be married to an ally. She ought to slap you upside your, well, I shouldn't talk about violence like that. But she ought to do something. We won't get into it right now. But no, we're talking about human connection. That's the key. Vico Marcantonio, who was he, the Italian brother who was a lawyer for W.E.B. Du Bois that helped him stay out of jail when they tried to throw Du Bois in jail for life in February 1951. You think he looked at Vico the Italian and said, ally? No. He's depending on his life. Jerry Gary, the white lawyers for Huey Newton. William Kunstler. We can go on and on. You all know what I'm talking about. I don't care if they're Jewish. I don't care if they're Catholic. I don't care if they're atheistic. You prove yourself by your witness, by your deeds, by your words, by your longevity, your constancy. That wonderful word of Jane Austen. Constancy. Being able to have a reliability over time. You see, same is true with the Palestinian struggle. Look at If Not Now. Look at Jewish Voices for Peace. Over and over again, willing to throw themselves into struggle. You say, oh, this is solidarity at its deepest level. That's not just coalition. You all see the point I'm making. That's very important. We don't have enough examples of solidarity because interests have become so overwhelming. The selfishness has become so pervasive that people think, well, why are you helping me? Because everybody assumes it's transactional. So what Martin Buber called I-it rather than I-thou. Transformational is I-thou. Transactional is I-it. And there's always a transactional element because we're human beings. But if it's just that, it ain't gonna last. It's not gonna last. Does that make sense though, brother? Yeah, indeed. I appreciate that deep question.
Thank you, Dr. West. That was incredible. My name is Martin Gassner. Good to meet you. And my question is, Dr. Cornel, I'm a little nervous. Dr. Cornel West, in understanding the power of communication in words, like your references to powerful musicians from the past, how are we going to focus on creating a sustainable dialogue and foster community and curiosity, instead of getting caught up in debates and division and the winner-loser dynamic? Thank you.
Lord. No, I think part of it has to do with because we live in such a polarized and gangsterized in many ways society. It's hard to find context where we can forge bonds of trust. Because the bonds of trust are preconditions of any solidarity. And a lot of times you get that in context that have nothing to do with politics. Nothing to do with it, could just be friendships, you know. It could be in mosques and churches, it could be sports, it could be in music and so forth. You have to have some continuous activity where you have bonds of trust. So then you can have debates without thinking that it's an attack on you, or else to put down or take down. But as long as the distrust is so high, everybody's walking around paranoid, wondering, what are they going to say about me? Is this an attack or is this really a question? Blah, 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 blah. So you have to be able to have a certain, almost a leap of faith, though. You have a certain revolutionary patience and give people benefit of the doubt, even if they do something wrong, as if oneself has never done anything wrong. You try to keep track of the best inside of them. I know that hit Sean Hannity the other night when we were going at each other. I said, Sean, I'm just trying to tease out the best that I can, some good in you, man. Been trying for 15 years. I know something's in there. God almighty. Everybody got something good in them. But that is crucial. That's very crucial, because if you don't have that effort and then examples that are seen that encourage others to do it, then everybody walks around deracinated, rootless, isolated, thoroughly individualistic, trusting no one, feeling no one is reliable. And that is a nightmare. That is a nightmare. And I think, we see the fruits of that in terms of the levels of escalating suicides among our precious fellow citizens, especially the young ones. And the black ones, of course, historically, black people have always killed themselves less in the history of America up until 10, 12 years ago. And now it's quadrupled. See, that's a nihilism that even Nietzsche didn't capture. Is nihilism still too abstract on the page? This is lovelessness, hopelessness, touchlessness, grinlessness in life. It doesn't get more raw than that. That's not nihilism fashionable. You talk about over the cafe and read the spoke, those stuff. That's where you're getting ready to go to the crack house as paradise. Because it's the only place where you have a sense of belonging. And I've always told folk, you find me in a crack house before you find me in the White House. I said that before I started running, But the reason is because most folk in the crack house, and I've been in there with a whole host of my partners, a lot of them in there because they're so hypersensitive to pain. That's a form of empathy. They can't take the world. It's so painful, and they're hypersensitive to it, and they're trying to get a distance from it. They're trying to get some buffer against it. Whereas if you go in the White House, corruption, legalized bribery, normalized corruption, lies, mendacity, saying one thing. Of course, we believe in a liberal rule of law where everyone is treated equally. Have you looked on the ground lately of how people are actually treated? Quit lying. It's a beautiful ideal. We can fight for it, but quit lying. 1% of the population own 90% of the wealth. 3 individuals have wealth equivalent to the 50% of the citizenry. 160 million people have wealth equivalent to 3 individuals. But America is one of the great egalitarian experiments of the modern world. Quit lying. When's the last time you've been to Sweden? Or Finland? Or Norway? Or a whole host of other examples of people who are much more egalitarian in practice than the United States. But one's an empire. See, we're an empire. Most of the nations are not empires. That makes a big difference. 62% of every dollar we have, the discretionary budget goes what? Pentagon. 62 cents for every. So when it comes to wars, limitless money. When it comes to health care, quality schools, jobs with a living wage, austerity. Oh, we've got to balance this budget. We want to make sure that we don't go into debt. That is what Brother Martin called warped priorities. Ain't got nothing to do with the precious humanity of poor and working people. Poor and working people just an afterthought. If you can keep them pacified at each other's throats, then you don't have to worry about solidarity. So if you confront the most powerful rather than scapegoat the most vulnerable. See, the latter is the fascist move. And America is, in fact, moving very much toward fascism. And the problem is that for those who want to engage in anti-fascist praxis that has substance to it, it's not just briefly interim, you're going to have to speak to some of the folk who are crazy about Trump. See, I go into Trump country. That's one reason why I go on Sean Hannity. I know that's Trump country. You see, because when I go into Trump country, I don't see stereotypes. I see human beings who are making choices. 1 out of 8 went for Bernie Sanders. 1 out of 12 went for Obama. Now with Trump. Economically frustrated, often deprived, seduced by deeply racist and sexist and xenophobic formulations. And because they feel so helpless and hopeless, they're looking for a Pied Piper, a strong man, a tyrant. The kind of thing that Plato talks about in that latter part of the Republic, when Plato says, no democracy will ever be able to sustain itself. Because the unruly passion and the pervasive ignorance of the citizenry will always, in the end, call for a strong man for order. Order over justice. Hierarchy over democracy. And one of the reasons why democracies are so rare in the history of the species is that they are these moments of massive interruption in the history of kings and queens and monarchs and oligarchs and plutocrats who subjugate everyday people, to use the language of Sly Stone. And America viewed itself as a great democrat. No, the Federalist Papers not about democracy at all. It's about a republic. What did James Madison say? If every American citizen were a Socrates, it would still be a nightmare. They could put that on Fox News and CNN and MSNBC. That's not Miles Horton. That's not Muriel Rukeyser. That's not Walt Whitman. That's not William James. Those are Democrats. The founding fathers were looking for ordered liberty in the form of a republic. And that's one reason why even the white brothers who had no property couldn't vote. Couldn't vote, of course. Deep patriarchy, women couldn't vote. Black folk enslaved. Indigenous peoples, genocidal attacks and colonized and so forth. But tremendous struggle meant there are democratic possibilities. And here we are now, when we look back and you say, ooh, how do we, and this has been one of the themes that we've had from the very beginning, how do we reintroduce America to the best of itself? Frederick Douglass ain't no joke, y'all. Big Bill Hayward ain't no joke. Emma Goldman ain't no joke. And Copeland ain't no joke. Appalachian Springs, democratic sensibility. Stephen Sondheim, the greatest genius of them all. What does he say in that part 2 of Into the Woods? Dreams come true, but not free. You all remember Into the Woods by Stephen Sondheim?
Yeah.
That first part, I see my sister, she remembers. See that first part? Once upon a time, things were so sentimentally lovely. And then boom, part 2. Reality hits. Cinderella gets the prince and finds out he ain't worth a dime. All of that yearning, all of that energy, trying to get your foot into that shoe and find out he ain't worth a dime. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about in your relationships, but we won't go into that right now. Jack and the all the things they wanted, they get. And what happens? You're still empty. You're still not just dissatisfied, but there's something deeply inside of you. There's a spiritual nourishment you know you're not receiving, to use the language of Kafka. The hunger spirit. You see. That's also a part of how you keep a democracy alive. That's why the artists are always the vanguard of the movement. The artists, they are the ones. If you find an artist that says, I don't care about integrity, honesty, decency, I don't care about being true to myself, all I want is just to make money, they're going to be in Mike's basement after dark for a long time. They're not going to make it on the Apollo Wednesday night. Because you got to be true to yourself, and you got to muster something and find in your voice and touch somebody else's soul and unsettle their minds such that they remember you when you walk off that stage. See, that's James Brown. See, that's Sarah Vaughan. Hall & Oates actually did well. They didn't win, but that's all right. They got sold, but they're not Sam and Dave. Y'all know that. But the important thing is they true to themselves. And without our artists exemplifying that kind of honesty that then spreads, then the culture itself remains tied just into money, power, manipulation, domination. Very much so. You all been so kind to let me go on and on and on like this. I deeply appreciate it. Deeply appreciate it.
Brother West will be in the lobby briefly signing books. You can talk to him, get a book signed if you'd like. He's got a heavy schedule, but feel free to stick around. If the Jazz Boys are still here, maybe they could crank it up.
We want to salute Sister Harriet, too. Sister Harriet.
There he is. So Dr. West, if you go out in the lobby, have a chair, please. Please feel free to